What is driving the definition of quality for somebody who is a quality-driven person?
Well, yes, that's a big question, but actually it's quite a simple answer. Quality is based around ultimately what is good. And to understand what is good, we need to go way back to our mother's days. So give an example. Milk is a very, very good example. The milk that I consumed as a child and that we used in the restaurant over the years bears no resemblance to the milk that we have today.
Have you been thinking about starting a coffee side hustle? Our brand new Start a Coffee Side Hustle Mastermind group is launching this July, a 3-month online program designed for new or upcoming coffee business owners anywhere in the world. You'll define your business fundamentals, shape your business blueprint, and learn how to navigate the coffee industry in 2025 small scale, including how to use tools like ChatGPT for smarter planning. It's a grounded, guided way to get started with the support of people who have done it many, many times before. Registrations start at $189 a month for 3 months. Apply now at mapperforward.coffee/group coaching. Check the show notes for details. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a brand new 5-part series with Mark Bartlett from Bon Accord Products. Welcome to the podcast, Mark.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
First time guest, and this is a really significant series for a couple of reasons. One is because of what we're going to talk about, which is the bastardization of quality in cafes and restaurants. A conversation I've been wanting to have with someone for a really long time as our industry has shifted and changed. From the 20 years that I've been in the industry, and you've been in the industry for a few years longer than that. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. But the other reason that this is a significant series is because you are based here. I guess you're based here in Dubai for a big part of the year. Is that correct?
Yes, I say it's usually around about 6 to 7 months of the year, but it's never in one hit. It's in blocks because I'm constantly going home to New Zealand because New Zealand is my home and that's where I live. But sometimes I wonder. And then bouncing between the triangle of New Zealand, Australia, UAE, and then Japan. So it's quite a big triangle.
Citizen of the world, as we say.
Yes.
And you're living in Dubai. The reason that this series is significant is because this is the last series on the global podcast that will also be syndicated to the Mapper Forward Middle East podcast. So folks, for those of you who don't know, we have the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, which is the global podcast, and our sister podcast is Mapper Forward Middle East. And Mapper Forward Middle East was started with having a host, Sara Al-Ale. Shout out to my sister, Sara Al-Ale from That Coffee in Saudi Arabia. She was doing that podcast in Arabic years ago. And then when some things changed in Sara's life, we had to find other content to funnel through to that podcast. So we just sent the episodes that were happening on this podcast over to that podcast, and it's taken off. It's the #1 food podcast here in the Middle East on Apple Podcasts. Now what we are doing is we are going to be having completely separate content on the Middle East podcast than we do on the global podcast. And our guests on the Middle East podcast will be business owners and people who operate within the Middle East or the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, in the coffee industry and vertically integrated kind of industries. And so the reason it's an interesting crossover is because Mark and one of our first guests on the podcast in the Middle East podcast is Raw Coffee, Matt and Kim from Raw Coffee, and Bon Accord and Raw work very closely together here in this region. And so if you want to hear, if you're interested in doing business in the Middle East, if you're interested in finding partners here in this region or anything like that, the Map of Forward Middle East podcast is going to be a great resource for you. And if you are in the Middle East and listening to this series now, the next series that comes out with this will be with Sherin and James from Bunni, and the series after that will be with Matt and Kim from Raw Coffee. And then on, we will continue to have brand new series that are separate for the podcast. And I will be the host. It will be in English, and we just invite you to check out both contents. So now that we've said that, Mark, can you do me a favor and help people understand what role you've played in the hospitality industry in the time that you've been in it? I mean, we would need 3 or 4 hours to do that and do it any justice. So give us the short version.
Hey. Well, I'm an older person. I don't feel particularly older, but I look at my passport sometimes and go, it gets a bit of a worry when you look at your passport photo, the old passport photo that you thought was awful. You look at that, you look at the new one and you go, oh my God, that previous one was fantastic.
I know how you feel, bro. Trust me.
So basically, I've been involved in the food and beverage industry since 1976.
Wow.
And long story short, I was going to be a lawyer, and I went to law school for a few months, and and all due respect to those wonderful lawyers out there, I looked around at all the people that were around me, and I thought, do I really want to be this? And I decided no, I didn't. So then I decided that I thought, well, being, at that stage, I was 18 years old, so I was the youngest in the class. And
wow.
And I thought, okay, 18-year-old, what do you do? That was 1978 or 74. What do you do? And I decided that, okay, I'll be an airline steward, because back in those days, and all you people who are airline stewards or hostesses now, or whatever you want to be called, it was a very, very well-paid job with lots of off, and you went to wonderful places. That my father's friend at the time was the CEO of Air New Zealand, and he sort of sat me down and said, "Listen, Mark, firstly, you're too young, so we don't take people under 20. So go and get some experience in food and beverage and see how you go." So, and I did. I got involved, and all of a sudden, I fell in love with it. And the idea of being a lawyer went out the window, and the idea of being an airline steward went out the window. Thank God for that. And because I believed what I think is a really interesting and exciting life. So I worked with some amazing people when we opened our second restaurant in Auckland, and we were very lucky to become top of the tree within New Zealand and Australasia. And by the time I got to 1989, I had decided that, listen, I was bored, I think, and that I didn't want to be feeding 80 people a night, which we were consistently doing. I wanted to bring that concept to millions. And
wow.
And then the rest is history from there on. So it was a big learning curve. And I've been very fortunate to have some amazing people around me to help me get there. And not least of all, my business partner, Bon Accord, Paul Lamy. And we just found that we had the same standards, different approaches. Would I have thought that the products that we are producing now, which I believe are world leading, would I have thought that would have satisfied me back in 1989? Absolutely not. I was like, no way. But that journey through that understanding of manufacturing and manufacturing quality and what was happening during those periods of time, that period of time, taught me a lot. And now I'm very proud of what we do. And I'm very pleased that, so many of the chefs who have been through my kitchens or associated with me around the world say to me, "Hey, Mark, this is a great product, great thing." So that's been a really interesting thing.
And I just want to clarify something, folks. There's no financial arrangement between Mark and I. There's no, like, Bon Accord is not a sponsor of the podcast. Right, Mark?
No, not at all. No.
I consume Bon Accord's products at Raw Coffee. And the way that Mark and I started a conversation was a few months ago. I was getting very interested in understanding the matcha craze. And I was really curious about whether it was going to be a fad or not. This industry here in the Middle East is very fad-driven. And what I started to see was matcha was something that was taking over not only this region over the past few years, but it was really prevalent in Australia, it's becoming really prevalent in the United States, Europe as well. And so I was really interested in understanding what's driving that. What's this ceremonial grade stuff that people are talking about, and why doesn't Raw, where I drink coffee, where I drank matcha, why didn't they call it ceremonial grade? So I was curious about a few things. And then we've eventually arrived here where we have the luxury of having a conversation with Mark and, really benefiting from his experience and wisdom in the industry. And we realize that the conversation isn't actually about matcha. The conversation is about quality. The conversation is about the kind of things that marketing and publicity and social media are doing to drive this shift over time with regards to our expectations in restaurants and cafes and consumers' expectation of what the restaurants and cafes are doing, and the role of awards and blah, 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 doing in all of that. And so the question we want to address in this episode of this series, as we are talking about the bastardization of quality in coffee in cafes and restaurants, is what is quality? And I imagine, Mark, that since you started in this industry, the idea of quality has shifted for different reasons over the decades. It certainly has in the couple of decades I've been in the industry, but you've got a greater breadth of setting up some of the best restaurants that have existed in Australasia. And when you're doing something like that and you're a headed restaurant and you're looking at the relationship between the quality that people want in the 80s and the 90s and into the noughties and now, what is driving the definition of quality for somebody who is a quality-driven person?
Well, yes, that's a big question, but actually it's quite a simple answer. Quality is based around ultimately what is good. And to understand what is good, we need to go way back to our mother's days. So give an example. Milk is a very, very good example. The milk that I consumed as a child and that we used in the restaurant over the years bears no resemblance to the milk that we have today. And I'm a great believer in looking at, say, for example, milk, and I'll just focus on milk because it's just everybody knows. A cow is designed to eat one thing and one thing only, and that's grass. And when that cow consumes grass and consumes it in sufficient quantity that it is replete and is able to produce milk, that cow produces the best milk on the planet. That milk is very high in all those nutrients that we value, but particularly omega and omega-3. Healthy milk, cows that are farmed in that way produce an excellent milk product. Now, back in the 1970s, there were no major milk giants around. They didn't exist.
Yeah.
A whole series of independent milk cooperatives, et cetera, throughout New Zealand and Australia and through Europe. But then when
we had milk bottles, remember back,
well,
I remember opening the door and the milkman would drop. I'm definitely dating myself here, and do the math and you'll figure out how old I am. But we used to open the door and the milkman would leave a couple of glass milk bottles.
Yep.
With the foil seals, and my mum would leave the cash on the doorstep of the house, and the lucky one got to skim the fat off the top.
Exactly. I know. I came from a large family. It would be 6 bottles of milk when my mother used to tear her hair out because she'd open the fridge and all 6 bottles were open.
Because you want the fat off the top.
And at the other end, towards the end of the day, or because we get milk delivery basically every day, and there'd be all these bottles with this much milk left in the bottom because no washed out.
Oh God, weren't they good days?
They were very
milk
good
tasted
days.
different.
But I remember the conversation around why milk bottles had to go. I remember it well, and it was
why?
It was commercial hype.
Okay.
So we were all convinced, I was never convinced, but we were all supposedly convinced that putting milk into plastic was safer, better for the environment, from a health aspect was better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course now, and then they went to cartons and they went to all sorts of other things, but now it's coming full circle. And so those milk companies now are providing milk bottles. And of course we know glass is the ultimate recyclable material, or one of the ultimate recyclable materials, and often can be multi-use. I remember going and visiting, one of the school trips that we did was to visit a milk processing plant, again a small plant, and they had a bottle washing area, and these were all the milk bottles that were brought back, and they were all washed and dried and done and then refilled and sent off again, and they were multiple use. But there was lots of stories around why, lots of things put forward as to why that couldn't exist. Well, the reality was it came down to commercial decision. Corporates, exactly. Corporates.
Wow. I mean, it's when you say it like that and you start to see the relationship of who's really defining what is quality. And I'm not getting conspiracy theorist or anything here. What I'm saying is we lived in a time where the supply chain was much shorter. For something as simple as milk, the supply chain was much shorter. The farmer, the milkman, home.
Exactly.
And that was a circular economy. You drank the milk, the bottles went back to the milkman got the milk the next day, cleaned and washed the bottles, dried them, filled them with milk again, and we got milk back to us.
Exactly. And it was a very simple system. And people would argue, today it would be too expensive to do that. I hear that argument on lots of things, but I don't necessarily buy it. Certainly from a corporate perspective, you're doing it in that way, that may well be the case or may not be the case. But at the end of the day, it's like the baker. Another example, bread. Very good example. So back when I was a young lad, there were bakeries everywhere, independent bakeries, and they were baking breads of various levels of quality, but you went to Mr. Smith because his bread was better than Mr. Brown's, and his business flourished. But slowly, and I'm talking the mid-60s and the 70s, when you got into that late 70s, that all started to change. And all these small bakeries were either bought up, or big bakeries would come in, producing bread that was substantially cheaper than what the small baker could do. Now, the argument was, we need cheaper bread. Yes, we probably do need cheaper bread, but we need good, cheaper bread.
Nutritious.
Exactly. So we look at, and bread's another good example. When we grew up, nobody spoke about gluten intolerance. Nobody. And the reality is very few people actually suffered from it. But everything changed from about the late 80s, it started to come in and being gluten, even within our products. Bonaccord, we say it's gluten-free. And I suppose I didn't really think too strongly about it until we first started going into Japan. And I would say that to our Japanese potential customers, our product's gluten-free, and they'd go, what's that?
We don't care. It's not a thing for us.
It wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
And then when you dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the manufacturing process, so for example, if you're and I'm a manufacturer, so I can speak with some authority. You go back to the original baking days, and the baker, he would have his own yeast that he would use, or his own method of making this product. And the bread would be worked and then left to rise and go through that process several times. And you ended up with a bread that was what it is today, what we know about good artisan bread is.
Mm.
Then you look at the big processors; they don't have the time to do that. They don't have the time. So then they introduce what they call the fasterizers, and so all of a sudden a process that might take, and I'm talking just ballpark figures here, but that might take 2 hours to rise, or on some breeds it can be much longer than that. They can't wait. That needs to be risen and proven within minutes, not hours.
Wow. I thought you were going to say like sourdough that takes 2 or 3 days. I know that they have a lot of fake sourdoughs now. They write sourdough on it and it's got like 23 ingredients.
Yeah.
It's like, bro, sourdough's got 4 ingredients. What the fuck are you talking about?
Exactly. You're entirely right. And that's and listen, I have no particular scientific proof for what I'm about to say, but I believe that the average consumer, particularly in the Western world, particularly in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, Canada, and probably the UK. I can't exclude Europe from a lot of this, although they do have a problem. We consume far more gluten now because there's more gluten in that slice of bread that you're buying commercially than that fully proven sourdough, that proper sourdough. And there's a whole range of different breads that are properly proven, and all that fermentation has eaten and consumed a lot of that gluten. So, let's be conservative and say it's double, but I know it's more.
I have a question for you there, if that's okay. I apologize for interrupting, but is it gluten or is it glyphosate?
Oh, both. Yeah.
There's a direct correlation, right, between the time that glyphosate or Roundup started being introduced into monocropping and where gluten sensitivity in inverted commas started cropping up. I could eat bread when I was a kid, and now I have a sensitivity but not to flour that's grown in Italy.
Yep.
I don't have a problem with any Icon flour. Anything that doesn't have any kind of Roundup on it, I can eat bread all day. But when the second it's got glyphosate on it, it's like I go into rashes and blah, 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 blah.
Yes. I mean, they're two separate issues.
Okay.
One is an allergen per se, and that's going to have an effect, and it could well have an effect on gluten intolerance to a small degree or to a high degree. But then the other is consuming too much gluten. So the uninformed will say, I have to cut back on my bread. No, you don't actually. You buy the right bread, and you'll find with that right bread, you don't need to have 6 slices.
Right.
2 will do.
Right.
Because it's filling and it's done correctly. So there's a whole range of things that affect that. But I agree with you. It's one of the other things that does concern me is too much fiddling with our food, and with people, they say, oh, this is safe and et cetera, but it's not until 20, 30, 40, 50 years later we actually learn what actually didn't work. Give you a good example, margarine and butter. Now, you're a young lady.
Don't touch the stuff.
I don't know whether you remember, but in New Zealand, it was illegal to have margarine.
Yeah.
Didn't let
yeah.
you. And it wasn't for health reasons. It was to protect the New Zealand dairy industry.
Yeah.
However, then and I can't remember what decade it was, and probably the 80s, I don't know. And we were all told, butter is bad for you. It's causing heart disease. Fat is bad. Meat, protein, etc. is bad. Cut it out. Switch to margarine.
You remember the ads? I can't believe it's not butter.
Yes. Yep. Because it isn't.
It's not. And I can tell you, as someone who loves butter, but is vegan, don't judge me, Mark.
Yep.
But I would love to be able to taste something that tasted like butter and actually use it. I won't touch the stuff. I will not touch margarine, even though it is technically vegan. It's all chemical, and it will destroy your brain cells. It will destroy your health and your gut microbiome. It's just, in my opinion. It will.
Well, margarine's a very good example. Yeah, a very good example. And I often use it now. Do you remember all this Wonder Meat and et cetera? Now, my sister's a vegan, and I don't have anything against vegan. I think. Thank
you, sir.
Well done. Good lifestyle. But it's a lot harder to do, and you know that.
It really is.
You really know.
I'm going on 16 years, yeah.
But for the vast majority of people who think I might be vegan for a little while, and so I'd go for the easy thing. I really like steak, but I can't eat it, but I'll have this Wonder Meat. And I always say to people, the correlation is the same as butter to margarine.
Margarine.
Read
100%.
the ingredients on your packet. And that's the most important thing. And understand.
Which leads me to this question about as we wrap up this episode, I do want to include this question in this episode. What is the correlation between quality and nutrition?
Good quality normally is good nutrition. However, if you're going to eat good quality chocolate all the time, it's not going to be terribly good for you. So everything in balance. So a beautiful egg that's grown from a happy hen that is fed what hens should be eating, or milk for cows who are fed what cows should be eating, or vegetables that are grown in an environment that is. I don't talk about organic. I talk beyond organic, and we can talk about organics later in another.
Yep, we will.
Where you know who that farmer is. And you get a snapshot view of that in a farmer's market. So a proper farmer's market, you get to know. So things that are grown properly, does it need to be 100% organic? No. But then you need to understand why it doesn't need to be. And in Japan, one of my closest friends in Japan wrote the Organic Bible in Japan in the 1980s. And he has moved his whole view about organics and to a beyond organic, and we can explain that in a later time. So
wow, I'm excited about talking about that because I'm really into this idea of farming that's shifting towards regenerative and agroforestry where it can, and how important that is as a part of quality. If we think that the quality is related to taste and it's related to what we're putting in our bodies and disconnecting that from where it came from, we're really not considering the whole part of the conversation in the way that we're engaging with what we as individuals think quality is. So we're going to, in the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about when did our focus shift away from quality and what have we replaced that with? So join us for that. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon, and stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.